creative for Disney Cruise Line. He oversaw the transformation of Disney Springs, and he now consults globally to help people apply narrative experience and design to build engagement and brand. Theron's book, Creating Memorable Worlds, was just announced last week. Go grab your copy while we still have signed and numbered ones available. It'll release next spring. It's a very practical, fundamental description of how the industry works and how complex projects get done from concept to completion. Kile Ozier, everybody knows the guy. We're actually not left or right. Come on, guys, you're out of order here. Yeah, well, I'm not on my toes, so. Kyle, the other side, I'll jump over there. He's the guy. He's been involved in TEA forever. Kyle's list is pretty long. He's been creative director for Universal Studios Orlando. He helped launch experiences at Motion Gate Theme Park, Open Yaz Waterworld. He produced the 92 candlelight ceremony for the National AIDS Memorial Quilt at the Lincoln Memorial, and a bunch of other stuff. Kyle's book, Creative Catalyst, launched last year, and it's all about leading and inspiring creative teams. Carl Jablonski got into this business in 1980 when WDI called him for a little project called Epcot that launched a long career with Disney, doing estimation for their parks and resorts around the world, applying his background in theatrical scene design. He's also been a global development manager for NBC, Industrial Light and Magic, and others. Carl is currently co-writing a textbook on estimating for show with his colleague Ian Kelly. That'll be out next year. So thanks for being here, all three of you. To set the context for this, I mean, look around the room. This room gets more full every year. There are a growing number of classes and programs, and I think that's just an unbelievably fantastic thing as an educator, right? So it means a couple things, but we need resources. We need to understand what it is we should be teaching with this stuff. These guys are here because they've been here around a long time, and they've got a lot to say in terms of how we can be putting these programs together, all right? So I'm just gonna go in order here. Theron. One of the core questions when we're developing a curriculum, of course, is like, what should we include? What do we need to focus on? And as part of that, are there certain experiences that students need in order to get a global foundation, no matter what their skill area might be? Like big picture fundamentals we should focus on?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Hi, everybody. I would go back to what Marty Sklar said, right? It's not only dreaming it, but doing it. In this industry, it's so important to have the theory, the idea, the concept, but it doesn't help anybody unless it actually gets built and going through that process to actually make it happen. So I believe in academics, when we're teaching students about this, we need to expose them to both sides. Being able to put on a Hawaiian shirt, grab a lump of Play-Doh, and blue sky is one thing. But I've met a lot of students that feel like that's all that there is. When you're sweating in sand up to your knees, building a theme park for 4 years, pouring concrete and everything, that's the real doing it. Now, not everybody's gonna do it, but having an understanding about that total process, I think is really, really important. The other thing I would say, and I spend a lot of time talking to students about this, is that no matter what you do in themed entertainment, you're always going to be working for a client, always. So I often ask them, and my creative brothers and sisters is primarily who I'm talking to, because that's where I spent my 30 years. And I said, if you're always working for a client, does that mean the artwork is yours or theirs? And that's a hard realization, because you often fall in love with your own ideas to the point where you no longer serve the client. And they say, I don't like the idea, and bring me another one, and it's often a reshaping of the same old idea because you can't create a new one. So I could probably talk for 2 days on that, but that's just a little sample.
Martin, you okay? A couple days? Oh, okay. It's not military time. Kyle, one of the things that drives me nuts about education, and there are many of them, is that too often it's set up as a competitive sport. You know, where every student's focused on themselves. You know, it's my grade, it's my class rank, it's did I do better than Johnny? You know, that kind of stuff. I think it's a terrible flaw in our system. Maybe how can we like rethink our classes so it better reflects what actually happens out in the world, which is usually not set up like that?
like having a client.
Yeah.
I would like to come back to that too at some point about, for instance, the way I work is I draw from the client a way to create their idea. And then if that doesn't work, obviously you have to keep going, but that's another conversation. For me, I don't know, when the question was first posed, I thought, well, the first thing to do is make sure that the students know that their graduation, that their diploma is their ticket to their career. They're not creative directors yet. They have all the tools, but until, you stood in the desert and seen your idea bake in the sun or disappear in the rain, reality. I'm not an academic, so I don't know the fight that I know. It's legendarily bureaucratic. So to create a model where students can be graded on their collaborability, for instance, just now the next gen thing going down the way has been really enlightening to watch. Like some of the groups have really gathered around a producer being, but they're all being empowered by the producer, which is the idea. How do you grade that? I don't, it's not there's no binary here, but I think the thing to really impress on anybody, young people learning about the business in school, is that there really is no hierarchy of knowledge, that the producer is not responsible for knowing how to do everything, and so that the producer can learn to empower the team. I don't know how you grade that. I mean, for me, it's like make it pass fail, so that people aren't invested in their portfolios. Well, their portfolios will always be invested in, but their GPA. It's not that, because that's what's important. What's important is, can you work with people? Can you get an idea developed? So I have no answer to your question. But this, I think, is the conundrum, is how we approach the process. I think that's where maybe we have to lean heavily on academia to create, given that there's a hierarchy, somebody's got to make the decision. But my rule is, if everybody's been heard, they're more inclined to embrace what's ultimately the decision of the producer or the director or whoever's in charge. But that being has got to not hoard information. Anyway, so we're short of time, so I gotta shut myself up.
Oh, yeah.
Just a quick comment, and one to also demonstrate disruption is really important, right? So what I would say is that competition really has no place in this industry. That said, it does happen, right? You don't graduate believing that you're going to immediately become a Joe Rohde. And even if Joe Rohde had the initial idea for Animal Kingdom, it was completely different once it was built. And the reason was because all of the other experts from all the other departments, divisions, disciplines, and roles applied their own expertise to it, which made the idea better in the end. So I think that's really important for students to grasp when you're in a co-ed, cross-dependent, you know what I mean? You've got all of these different graduates, areas of focus, technical and non-technical together, mashed up, and having to figure it out. That's what the real industry looks like.
Oh, something Professor Woodcock said that reminded me I wanted to mention too is, in creating your teams, is to make sure that we'll call them producers or whatever the fulcrum of that team is, include, when we say everyone, I mean everyone, engineers, caterers, whoever is invested in the ultimate experience. Everybody should be able to contribute, and then, back as I said before, then your final product, which is an amalgam of all of that, is embraced by everyone at some level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really good advice. One of the things that I remember now, bringing all this up about looking at everybody in your team, when I was at LucasArts, one of the shows we were doing for a new design for a theme park needed a story, and it was for a promotional video for the client. And just hanging around and doing my work, I walked around and I met everybody, and I knew what they all did in the staff we had. And one of them was a janitor, a young man. He was going to school, just a young man. And I found out he was an aspiring writer. And I said, well, I'm going to tell you a bit of a theme, and you write a story for me, and then let's see how it works. And he did. and I liked it. And so I gave it to the team, which was Steve Beck was the show producer. And I gave it that with no names on it. I gave him that story and 2 professional writers that we hired to do the story. And he went away for a couple of days and read all these things. He came back, he says, I want this one. And he says, who's this? Who wrote this? Because I don't even know this person. I said, just go out the door. He's a janitor. And Steve was just blown away by it, and we used him for the story.
Theron, I'm a huge evangelist for learning by doing, as I was saying just a while ago. That's how the brain works. That's how we learn things, right? But there are things that are challenging to do in a classroom situation, right? So, I mean, any ideas to help us like bring real life into what is often an artificial kind of a bubble, in class?
It's a great question. I think one of the most consistent aspects of working on a team in the industry is the really diverse nature of the makeup of the team. And there's a lot of cross-functional work, right? So on any team, you could be working with estimators, producers, writers, illustrators, all on the non-technical side. And on the technical side, you could be working with ride designers and robotics technicians, R&D architects, and all of those really super talented individuals get mixed together on a project, all with different focuses, all with different ways of doing things. And yes, sparks fly, but if you all work together to keep that tension really positive, that's how impossible things get done. And so I think if in the classroom, if there can be a mix of that where you're bringing together the theater department and the architecture department, the writing department and the illustrators and the actual department that's like the art department that's building models and crafting things, the interiors team, the more mashups you can do like that and you give them assigned projects, I think that's really important. The only other thing I would say is I've been to quite a few universities programs, and it's really easy to lean into the really beautiful, glorified aspects of like design and concept, and that's fun to teach because it's fun to teach. It's a fun part. I would say, where possible, be disciplined to provide programmatic information in the beginning. So the students are not just, wouldn't it be fun if we did a flume ride? The students would actually identify the programmatic information of a fictitious client, and that you would make some decisions about what type of story would be best represented physically to embody the programmatic information from the client. And that's just not how many bodies you can shove through. What's the thing, the ride technology, the story, the form, the color, that's going to resonate the story that gives the most emotional connection to the client's brand? Those types of things I think are really important, because let's face it, we can sit around and create really cool stuff for a whole generation. And that's fun and you'll learn a lot, but it won't help you in the field a lot. When you're standing in front of the client and they're like, okay, how's this roller coaster gonna work? Because I asked you to do something for elementary age kids, right? I mean, you don't wanna be in that situation.
So it's not just group projects in art class or English class, it's group projects bringing in people from all over the place and trying to get them to understand how to speak each other's language and understand where they're coming from, and being open to the idea that it's not just my idea. I am not my idea. I just, being open to stuff and not giving them an 87 at the end of the day,
Well, and I think there is something very powerful to be said about granular education. Even today, I've heard a lot of buzzwords and titles. And I don't know, I haven't read the actual documents, or we haven't worked with it together. But so often, for instance, 2 ideas. What if we had a class do a production where nobody could be what they aspire to be? Like an engineer would have to be an actor. So start learning how important each other is to themselves when they are, anyway, whatever. You see what I'm trying to say. The other thing is, when I say granular, I mean granular. Understanding, like in the next gen thing, we were in there talking to a group and they were talking about their budget and this and that, and my colleague says, and have you factored in the deconstruction of the current the current building that's there, you got to tear it down, and that's going to cost you X, and then you're going to have to rebuild this, and that's going to cost you X, and they're looking at them like, oh man, I don't know. When I teach like a timeline, running a script, a time script, I make sure you know how long it's going to take to get from the dressing room to the stage, which means when you have to send the PA to the dressing room and how long that's going to take, back everything out so that you know what's going on at every moment in your production, and every umbrella, go all the way down, and don't, well, I call it exploration of assumption. Don't assume and catch yourself. We assume all the time, so we have to examine it ourselves. I'm not here to lecture that, but this is the thing, is to go way beyond what we're used to saying and what's behind all that.
That kind of lends into next point here. Kyle, in your book, like Theron's, it's all about how to do things in detail. Like how you don't just say, we'll go write a rehearsal schedule. You show us exactly what that schedule looks like to the minute, literally, in your case, right? You tell, well, yeah, it's several pages long. Or this is exactly how you take care of your crew with details and stuff. It drives me crazy. I'll read books or articles or whatever, and they're talking about, yeah, we did this project and it was this great project, and yeah, it got rough there for a while, but we figured it out and got it done. And I'm thinking, I'm really happy for you, but I'd like to know, how did you get it done? What are some of the things that you tried that didn't work, and why? What are some of the things that you did try that got you to the finish line, right? Those are the details that students need in these books and classes and things like that, right? So any ideas on how we can approach things with that in mind? Or
Well, the more of our mistakes we can share, what did we learn from that mistake, or when this blew up in my face? And I think we have to be not precious about our own work. For a while at TEA, we had a thing called Elephants in the Room every year, and we had, like, John Benkowski did a whole presentation on the disaster of the Hard Rock
Park. Oh, yeah.
Right. But how did it happen? Where the mistakes were made? The whole successive. Go through that. We have to share these stories. And I'd say, there's academia, but there's, in this especially, this is craft. So bring in people who've made mistakes yet are still in the business. And the more, and I'm sure you've all done this. You've been in classes as a student. A person comes in and starts sharing a story, and pretty soon that can take twice the length of the class, because that's what you want to know. And we have to be really open about the learning process and the building process and everything from the ground up, mistakes made, what we've learned. And I think we, as documentarians of these industries and these crafts, need to look more. You referred to books. There were books like that, like, oh, we did this great thing, and I partnered with this big name and that big name, and we created this thing that you all know. You've learned nothing from that other than what a great career this person has had. We should really, my life's an open book. It's like every mistake I make, people already know. But and people should be taught not to be afraid to make mistakes. A producer, I kind of like it when I learn something on the first day. I make some bold statement, and somebody half my age goes, well, did you know? Didn't know that. Got to change that. I need to update my knowledge. And they go, oh, it's okay then to be wrong, rather than try to pretend you're right.
Yeah, in my experience in the classroom, it's kind of a two-edged sword. Fortunately, in my life, I've been around all the media, television, film, theatrical, everything, so you name it. And the students I've taught on occasion, well, more than occasion, have found ways to get me to talk about stories, because I got a million of them, and from all the industries, so I can talk about just about anything in the industry. And sometimes they get on a tangent when they start doing that, and I find out later that they learned more from my stories than they did from the syllabus that I had prepared. So it's kind of a two-edged sword for me. How do you do both, but you really are doing both. So that's where I'm coming from.
Well, Carl, we have this unfortunate habit of saying we categorize people. Those are the technical people over there, and they're the creatives over there. They're the artsy people, right? Now, I happen to believe everybody applies creativity in a variety of ways in everything they do. But the point is, there are people who do technical work, there are people who do creative work, and they have to understand each other. They have to be able to talk the same language and figure things out and get something done, right? And you're right in the middle of all that, right? So, I don't know, strategies, ideas about how we can help students bridge that gap and be thinking along those lines, so that, because all of us come up in like our own little field. I'm a writer, I'm an artist, I'm a whatever, and yet back to that group collaboration thing we were talking about earlier, you know, no, it's a family thing, it's a group thing, right?
Yeah, that's quite true. Again, my stories about what I've done go back to getting that same kind of input from other people. It actually happened the first time I recognized it happening, unfortunately, was at Imagineering with one of the, I think it was the ride engineer at one of the meetings. And he stopped in the middle of the meeting and said, well, you're just an estimator. What do you know? And, here I was, just a young guy. I didn't really have the chutzpah to tell him what. So I learned that actually it happened in all the media that I've been in whether if you're a director or an actor, there's a stage people, they're down here. If they're television film, you're in the studio and you're the backstage guys. And I don't know if that still goes on today because I haven't been in the industry for quite a long time, but I hope it doesn't. But if you start off and recognize that that's a possibility, you have to be a little bit more forward about what you do and what you are. Because, my answer was, well, yeah, I'm just an estimator, but I have a master's in scenic design. That's why I was answering the question. So you figure out different ways to kind of shut the room up, if you will, and I'm guilty of that.
One of the sources of the problem, I think, and this is IMHO, is so many students for the last several decades have been taught that there is an answer for everything. Because they've been, I better be careful there, they've been taught to test. And what we do, there is no answer. I think Joe Rohde is, there's no Disney way, and every story will tell you how to tell itself, and there is no one way. And if we can ingrain that in young people, they're not looking for the answer, so that they're free to come up with an answer. And if you do it in collaboration, you come up with, again, many answers, and it's the director or the producer's job to help. But in collaboration, what's the best way then to do it? And then, frankly, you're ready when the client goes, oh, I don't like that. You go, okay, Alice, what was that you said 2 weeks ago? Great, that's what we'll do. You've got this toolbox of ideas and concepts that you didn't use. But really, I think we're wrestling against the dynamic that people are taught without even thinking about it to look for the answer. And what we're about is comfortable disorientation. We're surprising people with a story they may think they already know, and they relearn it or re-experience it with the way we can give it to them.
The only thing I was going to say is, look, no matter what you do in the industry, we're creating experiences for human beings. So at some level, it doesn't matter if you're in the office and you do finance and you never show up on site, just to pick a position. We're all in the business of understanding human beings, understanding how human beings think and how they work. So the visitors and guests that come to what we create, that range of psychology, that range of goods and bads, that exists on our teams too, right? I'm in creative. I've seen more arrogant people in creative that shut down and destroy other people's ability to collaborate. And I will actually tell you, every new role that I had, a creative role with Disney for 23 years, it took me 6 months to a year to build trust with the other members on the team, because the last person that architects or engineers or the park work with so destroyed the relationship that there was no trust in what I was bringing to the table. It takes a while. So I would just say, seek to understand human nature. It will help you in telling stories, and it'll help you understand how to communicate on teams.
We actually have 8.5 minutes. Now that we've fixed education, any questions? You and then you. Sorry.
As an engineer, I'm curious, you said that there could be ways that classes could be structured so that you are stepping outside of it. So if, like, there was one you mentioned where it was like, let's say there was a theater course, everyone be something that they're not, right? Have an engineer be an actor be a stagehand, etc. If you're in the workspace and you want to explore those creative sectors, what can you do to set yourself in those areas when you're not experienced in that way? How can you try those areas out even though you haven't built that trust yet?
Outside of academia.
Yeah.
My first answer is join a community theater. Audition for something, a small role, so that you can, that would be my first answer. You would have to find your own opportunities, but they're absolutely there. Or even offer, I don't know, to read a book to a primary school. This is just off the top of my head, but you have to make your own opportunities, but they're there waiting for you to grasp, I think. Does that make sense?
Can I interject?
absolutely.
If you're on a team, for example, you can ask to shadow somebody. The great story that I tell often, Linda Alcorn, the great Linda Alcorn, was at the studios when I worked there, and I was a greenhorn, but I was an art director, which basically meant I had the responsibility of making the overall decisions, and we were doing a show that had a lot of show-actuated equipment, which I'd never done before. And instead of just sit there and pretend like I knew because I had the mantle of the responsibility, I basically pulled her aside and said, look, I've never done this before. I want to give you good direction. Could you help me learn enough so that I can help you by giving the right direction? So shadowed her, and she literally showed me and taught me the basics of show control systems, show action, the engineering things that would help me to help her. So if you're on a team and you want to pick up things, just ask somebody.
Well, it gives you the respect of the person you just asked, too. It's like, I think that has really served me in that I can't draw, I can't dance, and my writing is my strength, but I'm not a designer. So a lot of what happens in agencies, especially, is the creative director is like, forget it, I'll do it myself, and that'll never happen with me. So my job is to get the best out of you. So once that's communicated and that trust is established, then your team is rocking.
Yeah. I would add to that the best thing I've ever done, and the advice that I followed for me, was always ask the question to anybody you meet. Don't be afraid to say, oh, if I ask this question, it'd be a silly question or it'd be stupid or whatever. Go right up there and confront the person and say, hi, I'm Joe or Sally or whatever, and I'm interested in this kind of thing that you're doing. Can I talk to you for a moment on it? Don't be shy. The first thing you need to understand in show business, it's not a shy business. If you're a shy person, you probably might want to rethink that. You have to be a bit aggressive. There's just no way about it.
Some more questions? Yeah, sorry.
Hi. So I am currently an LFA student at UCF who is graduating next year, and I just recently thankfully accepted my first job offer for a full-time job in the industry. And I know, and I know you talked a little bit about how, when you're a student, you graduate, it's just your ticket into the industry to get a job. And so when you've already kind of gotten that first job, what advice would you have for that person for how to build a good foundation for a great career?
Well, I'll just give you my example. I started sweeping floors in the theater department at Cal State Los Angeles as a production supervisor. And every job, I took every job possible that had to do with theater, starting with sweeping the floors, teaching students stagecraft, whatever. So I don't know, today everybody wants to start at the top. You can't, mostly. So take your position and do the best job you can do with that position, and just keep your focus on the goal.
That was a little bit of what I was going to say too, Max, is I used to always challenge my teams to do the best work of your career. Now that may sound like a megalomaniac who's trying to, make something, but that's not really what I meant. Is every time you're on a project, or like yourself, you're just getting hired, you're bringing all this great knowledge and academic experience from your academic career. I mean, MFA, that's a lot of work. And you're bringing that to an employment situation, a team. But coming in a humble way, knowing that there's a lot that you still need to know, and doing the very best work of your career at that moment. The next project, you have a goal, I'm going to do the very best work of my career. It always keeps you focused on being hungry and curious to learn everything that you can possibly learn. A brain surgeon that comes out of their residency, you know, hard work, long hours, but the moment the scalpel hits the skin of the first real patient, quote unquote, after you're a real doctor in your own practice, there's real consequences. There's brothers and sisters associated with this person, and and it's the same type of thing. The first real project you're on, you know, it's $100 million. It's a lot of pressure. So don't ever be convinced that you know it all. Stay curious, stay hungry, and the most important thing is don't ever give up.
I manage a global team of designers on each of my projects, and they come from varied cultures, ethnicities, languages. And what I found is that I'm a strong believer in positive conflict, which to help create awesome innovation. But what I find is that depending upon the person's culture and lived experience, they may be conflict adverse. Do you have any suggestions on how to engage people and help them understand? Because a lot in school, they don't talk a lot about positive conflict as being a key ingredient of innovation. So how would you draw in those types of designers into the project?
Off the top of my head, well, I've worked in, Asia, Arabia, Australia. Where's Mr. Melbourne? There you go. Lived there for a year, loved it. The first thing that came to mind when you were saying that was how it's dicey to try to change the way people have been raised culturally. You know, Italians use their hands. And in fact, I used to accuse the Saudis of being the Italians of Arabia because there's a lot of talking, a lot of hand waving, you know, and nobody's really angry at each other. But you can only, I think, it's a case by case. You can individually support them, encourage them, but never force them to speak up. You might, if it's by Zoom, it's not as easy as when you're in a room and can go, did you want to add something? But I think anyway, add to that. I mean, you need to create your own rapport and help encourage them to participate.
I think what's interesting about this industry is you're in the business of, this is really going to sound like a hard sell, creating memorable worlds, which is the title of my book, but that's what you do, right? You're creating these memorable worlds, and it's everybody working together. So in a sense, your team is an individual microcosm. It may exist in a culture. It might be a team based in France. It might be, but if it's international and it's made up with a lot of different people, those are amazing teams. And in a sense, they could be a globe and a world unto themselves. So they decide how to identify how they work.